Hello everybody, Christian from Treasure Town here, and today we're going to be talking about the top 15 silver Washington quarters that you can be looking for that might be extremely valuable because of some small characteristics on them that you have to know about. And so we picked mostly variety coins. There's also a couple of special errors and some unique situations that you'll hear more about as we get into the video, but these coins are some of the most common that you might inherit. You might be able to pick through a junk bin in a local coin shop for. And so I wanted to give you a strong overview as to just what you might be able to expect. So as you can see, there's a lot of great coins that we're going to be able to cover here. And I'm going to try to be concise, quick, and explain what's going on these silver 90% quarters. And the first is going to be number 15. We're going to go from least to most valuable, is going to be Type B reverse Washington quarters. I believe that they were supposed to be used on proof strike coins where there's specially prepared dies, but some of those dies were not too dissimilar from the regular ones, like you couldn't really see on a quick glance. However, there's going to be some spacing between the E and the S in a way that the E and the S are normally touching on Type A coins. And so it depends on which date it is and how high of a grade it is, but some people really like, especially in higher grades, the Type Bs, and that's going to create some value separation. There's also going to be some key dates in the series, like with any series, and it is super important to mention the 32D and 32S. There's a lot of double dies, repunchment marks, things that we'll be talking about, but in terms of just, hey, this is a rare low mintage, we're going to be looking at the first year at the Denver and San Francisco mints. Philadelphia Mint 1932 coins are not particularly valuable, but the condition often can escalate their value really quickly as well, and a super interesting, first time that they're striking this quarter and not making a ton at those branch mints. 1943, the interesting thing here is there's a ton on this series overall, I'll say as a general comment, a ton of really interesting double dies. So they're pretty strong spreads, often will be in the In God We Trust, and you can see that super clearly. It's very strongly shelved with clear separation, and you can also see some of that almost clockwise rotation where there's going to be some spreading on the left side of the letters in Liberty. And so this one is going to quickly elevate this from, worth $10, $20 to a few $100s. And so that's the type of thing that I'm always excited to present about. 1946 also going to be having one that's a little more challenging to discern, but it's going to be a thin spread on the left sides of the letters in States of America. And then E pluribus unum, it's a little more challenging to see, but I think you're really going to be looking at those letters in the top of the reverse. 1942 similarly has one, and you can see it there's some shelving in the $quarter, kind of at 7 to 5 o'clock on the reverse, but it's super clear and strong in that RIC kind of top of the, well, I guess it wouldn't be top, but in the America, but it's super double vision and hundreds of dollars of payoff. Again, 1942. And it's really not like there's one period that has less double dies than another. It's all over this series in a way that kind of falls off by the 1970s on the clad coins. This is just an interesting comment. Really, any coin can be more valuable. This was an interesting struck through error where there was a little bit of copper that would have gotten in between the dies and the planchet, and it was struck hard into this otherwise regular 1963 coin, but it still auctioned for $720. It was in fairly good condition, so it's the sort of thing if you're going through a roll, say, of 1963, 1964 quarters in uncirculated condition, of which there are many. Maybe somebody hasn't looked close enough and realized that there's something like a struck through copper fragment, and there's other struck through ones that are going to be more valuable. It's always better when it's retained. And this is another great, not always visible at first glance, though this one is pretty cool. I think this one's more valuable than the prior, but it's a 1964 that was double struck in the collar. So it received a strike, and instead of the planchet that's now been struck into a coin getting ejected, it stayed in the collar, rotated a good amount, and it didn't even stay in the collar because broad struck coins is when it's not off center, but the retaining collars that should be around the sides of the coin did not properly hold the metal in, and so it also expands during its strike. So this one, is going to stick out probably among a regular quarter roll, but again, $700+ in a heritage sale. Number 9, we go back to ones that are going to be findable on any coin, and we talked about the 1943, but in this example, it's going to be all in the date, and this one seems to be more valuable as it gets higher mint state grades, but the 101, you're going to see, especially kind of in the top left corner of the 1 in the 1943 date, but then all throughout, clear signs of doubling all along. Here is an example of an over mint mark where in 1950, and again worth hundreds or more, you have a D over an S mint mark, so it would have originally been destined for San Francisco. You can see that, and then they would have made the die in Philadelphia or without a mint mark, and then they would punch in that S mint mark because it was supposed to be in San Francisco. Ultimately, was striking coins out of Denver, so they punched that D over it because they didn't want to discard of the entire die, and so that's how they saved it, and that makes things more interesting for coin collectors. 1934, we've got an awesome, and this one's one that I've definitely seen found before. Super clear again in that In God We Trust. That's the easiest place to look for it. Very, very strong. Again, you can look at a place like, is there some separation in the 3 or a little bit extra in the E of an extra serif there, split serif, but it's really, you're seeing double on that, especially bottom left corner of the In God We Trust. And this one's several $100s and a little bit more valuable than some of the other ones. 1936, similarly, I don't want to spend too much time on similar varieties, but you can see a very similar in terms of the doubling process having, and it can wear down, but you can often still see kind of, it's not even a serif, but kind of split corners in the trust, and it's going to be more prominent on the beginning letters, so the in and the TR in trust. 1942D, again, these World War II, this is a really cool one to own, and the value kind of reflects that. Such strong doubling in the Liberty in the top of the obverse. And then it's also going to be pronounced through the In God We Trust motto, but really across the top. I mean, look at that separation. Look at how thick these letters become. It's almost like they've been struck in 2 different places. And it's so neat because, again, with a die, it's the die that actually is doubled. It's not the coin getting struck twice. So then you're able to see that similar variety struck on many, many coins, and it wasn't caught for a long time, so we see a lot of coins making it out into circulation. 1937, it's less prominent in terms of where they're pointing on screen, but the In God We Trust, again, are really strong. This is a little more north-south, and it has a little less of a side spread, and then each of the numbers in 1937 also clearly coming through, and as you can see, the values on these really pop, so kind of 4 figures in AU conditions and up. Couple more here. We've got a 1943 double die obverse with a ton of separation. This one's obviously more worn, but these are a lot more valuable in AU condition and quite valuable, even as they're quite worn. I believe that that's just going to be a issue of supply. They're not quite found as commonly, and this is the 5 Stanton 103. So there's going to be a couple different 1943. If you're like, hey, why have we talked about 1943 coins? These are different individual dies that each had issues with doubling. So it's not like it shifts over time as it strikes. No, it's that same die pair that's striking each of the variety. And so this one, again, really high value one, something to definitely look out for. And there's also a ton more varieties, repunchment marks, double dies that we didn't get to in this top 15 presentation. This is kind of an incredible coin. It's not going to be one that you're likely to find. It sold for over $10,000. Was a proof coin, 1958, struck with a brockage where I believe another 1958 quarter would have gotten stuck on the reverse die after having, the reverse strikes it, the obverse die strikes it, it sticks to the reverse die with a clear obverse, on the outer side now of that die, and then it gets smashed into the next coin. And this is just a beautiful mirror image, spitting image of the obverse struck into the back of this one instead of getting the reverse strike. And I think that value, this would be an incredible error coin to own. We have an honorable mention, and this is something I was debating including in the presentation. This sold for about $15,000. There's definitely multiple of these. Basically, we kept striking, but retroactive 1965, 66, we're still striking with 1964 dies, silver 90% quarters. But somehow, some of those planchets ended up and made their way into dies 1965, 1966, and so were struck in silver, but on a date that should have been striking clad coins. And so it's very plausible how that could happen. This also is cool because it circulated a little bit, but not too much. Somebody would have noticed, hey, this is silver, but it's 1965. What's going on here? And ultimately ended up in an NGC AU55 holder. Super, super interesting, and it is a phenomenon that exists on half dollars. You can look for them on dimes, and there's some wrong planchet nickels. You obviously know about the 1943 pennies, so super neat, and that plays out here with the silver coins. But number one is going to be 1964. There's a couple of special mint sets that are really challenging to discern. The quarter is one of the least, there's a cross slit on the 1964 half dollar that makes it a little more obvious, but these are often called Adams proof sets or Adams sets. This one's sold for $23,400, but they're specially prepared dies. There's probably 25-ish of them known, somewhere in that ballpark range. And these would have been specially prepared dies that are not quite proof, but they're certainly not business strike. There's a ton of die polishing, and it's one of the more frustrating ones as well, because you might think you have it, but it's really challenging to know. I think there's going to be very sharp rims, and I could see even coin dealers saying, hey, I don't think you have it, and you really do. On the other hand, most of the people coming into a coin dealer and saying, hey, are these 1964s Adams quarters? Very unlikely that that is the case, but there's a whole interesting backstory, and I'll summarize it as briefly as I can. Basically, it would have been these, in preparation for these 65 through 67 special mint sets, probably was moving towards that and striking a couple of different mint sets that ended up with, I guess, the mint director or close connections of the mint, and eventually were confirmed to be these special strikes of extreme rarity on coins that are not crazy rare themselves. The designs aren't that rare, but it's still kind of the end of 90% silver quarters, silver coins in America, and as such, I think quite a significant item. So thank you for thinking through the top 15 quarters, and I will look forward to bringing you some other lists of what to look for and just what's out there in the world of coins. Thanks for watching the video. Make sure to head on over to treasuretown.com and sign up for our email list to stay up to date on everything that's happening, whether it's auction updates, exciting new inventory drops, coin collecting news, or general informational resources. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you on another one.